Well, last week, lawmakers in Congress took an important vote to prevent the doubling of the student loan interest rates for 1 year. But in doing so, they also voted on some other things. They voted to reduce other educational programs and also remove the grace period. So despite this being one of the worst times for recent college graduates to get a job, you're going to have to start paying off those loans immediately. So what will the future hold? Well, quite a few people are predicting that less money in state budgets, along with rising tuition, will mean fewer low-income students will have access to higher education. It means colleges will cater to the wealthiest in this country, those who, at the very least, don't need to be catered to. I want to talk more about this with Kyle McCarthy, Director of Community Outreach for Default, the student loan documentary. Hey there, Kyle. I know you guys have looked at specific cases of students and their struggles with loans. Talk to me about some of the biggest challenges going on these days.
Well, we're seeing students just not being able to afford to go to college anymore, which is unfortunate because, so many people have been told for so long that that is the key to success. So we're also seeing lots of people that are just defaulting on their student loans, which sets them in an even worse position. So they've graduated and gotten their degree, but are now having their credit destroyed from defaulted student loans. And as many as 1 out of 5 are defaulting on their student loans, which is really bad.
It's so interesting because back in, our parents' generation, they would come out of college with nothing. Now, we're coming out of college these days with negative, which is different than nothing. And now you're saying when you default on your debt, your credit's being destroyed. Break down for me a little bit, Kyle, sort of the system here and, how this is creating an even larger gap in income inequality.
Sure, and you said it. Our parents didn't have this situation. They weren't burdened with this huge debt. And just since 1978, tuition has gone up almost 900%, far exceeding inflation. So our parents really didn't have to deal with the situation, and we're coming out of school with $25,000 average just out of undergrad, and we're in the worst job market we've seen in so long. So now students are expected to pay back immediately, not really have this grace period. That's just so unfair and very scary.
Talk a little bit about this bill passed, I think just before the July 4th holiday, by Congress, literally with moments to spare. Break down some positives and negatives here on who this affects.
Sure. Well, it will save some people some money, but what's happening is, like I said, you're going to have to pay immediately, and there really isn't that grace period, in which, if with such a horrible job market, that is impossible for so many people to start paying back, which really puts them in a position where we're going to see even more defaults and people just being thrown in a horrible situation where they're going to just suffer from a lifelong student debt and just never be able to escape.
Now, I know that there's a petition going around, Kyle. It's calling for student loan forgiveness. I know this was one of the big topics at the Occupy Wall Street protests. But the bottom line, let's be realistic here. This is a time when our federal budgets, our state budgets are really a mess, and they rely on some of this money to be paid back, this money that they loaned. So why is this, one of the most prominent solutions being proposed, complete forgiveness?
Well, it's actually not complete forgiveness. I believe you're talking about H.R. 4170, the Student Loan Forgiveness Act of 2012. And so one of the things it actually calls for is for students to pay back 10% of their income for 10 years, the 10-10 program, which, it would actually put people on a better footing when they come out of school. And it includes private and federal loans, which the IBR program does not. So with this, it would actually put them on a payment program, which is reasonable. And it is not by any means just total forgiveness act. But what it does is it allows people that don't have this disposable income, our entire generation right now, to actually spend money and go out and fuel the economy. And it would, if anything, it would be a great thing for the economy because so many people with Generation Y, Generation X just don't have the money. It's all going to student loans. So with this, it would actually be 10%, which would be far less than what most people are paying right now. And after 10 years, it would be gone.
I think that it's important that you brought something up too, private loans and public loans. Now, certainly there's a very low interest rate. I think it can be argued for government-issued loans for these public loans. But a lot of students still can't pay, especially for some really amazing, top-notch schools. You know, you get a little bit of money from the government with low interest rates,
right,
but then you have to subsidize this with, you know, loans from Citibank or loans from some of these big corporations and banks that can charge a much higher interest rate. Talk a little bit about how that has impacted students.
Right. Well, like you said, there are federal and private student loans, and the federal loans do have some more consumer protections on them, but the private student loans are not really regulated, and the interest rates are sky high a lot of times. And we're seeing people defaulting on these when the same banks or same companies will own the collection companies as well. So what will happen is they will make far more money if someone defaults because they can collect it on the back end as well. And which is unfortunate about the IBR program, you can't roll your IBR or your private student loans into the interest-based repayment program. But with HR 4170, that would be the case, which is why 1 million people have signed this. And we've really been telling people to go to listentothemillion.com, which is basically getting the word out about this bill and telling Congress to bring this to a vote and listen to your constituents.
I think it's important too, Kyle, to talk about for-profit colleges. We're talking, you know, University of Phoenix, Kaplan. There's a new study out that shows that students who attend these for-profit colleges earn significantly less than students who attend, you know, comparable schools. I mean, what do you make of what's going on here, especially with this nonprofit thing? I mean, it was really marketed as a way to help people who already have jobs or children, but it seems to me in a lot of cases it really preys on people who don't understand what's happening.
Oh, without a doubt, and that's so unfortunate. You're going after the people who are suffering the worst and throwing student debt on top of them. And a lot of these for-profit schools are owned by banks. And so what is their motive? Their motive is to make money. And they don't care if you can or cannot pay or what your situation is. They want their money. And so by really going into some of these areas and telling people, oh, yeah, you can get whatever degree you want, and you'll make so much money when you're coming out. That's what we're seeing with a lot of these schools. And they're being just saddled with debt and coming out with a worthless degree or a degree that's going to actually earn them far less than other degrees. And that is so unfortunate.
I want to talk really quick about your project that you guys have been working on, Default, the student loan documentary. What were some of the most surprising things that you found that you think American people need to be aware of?
Well, just the fact that a lot of people are having their lives wrecked and that there needs to be a solution. You know, we're told we need to go to school, we need to do all this to make our lives better, yet it's we're seeing education being treated as a commodity now, and it needs to be thought of as a right. And you shouldn't have to suffer because you went to school to try to better yourself and try to better your country too. So and we're seeing people that just suffer from medical issues who have to take time off school and they still have to pay their student loans and can't get out of them if they can't get jobs, still have to pay them, and that's just making their situation far worse.
Yeah, certainly the question of health care, the question of education, all of these things seem to be a little bit interwoven here, and it really does lead, as we said, to this larger and larger gap in income inequality. Want to thank you for being on the show, Kyle McCarthy, Director of Community Outreach for the documentary Default, the Student Loan Documentary.